This video contains content that viewers may find disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
Welcome back to another episode of 100 Horrible Ways People Can Die. I'm John.
And I'm Alex. Today's episode is going to be a special on-location episode where we're not far from Niagara Falls. And we'll be talking about the history of Niagara Falls and some of the horrible ways people have died there.
So the Niagara River, located in around the Buffalo area of Niagara Falls, and both are at Niagara Falls and Buffalo. Erie and Niagara County. And we're rocking a lot right now. If you have video, you can see that we're right on the river on a boat. This is a 30-foot Silverton Express, and it's pretty rocky.
Yeah.
look, you could probably hear maybe the waves. What do you think? You think they could hear it, Alex?
I don't think they can hear anything, but we'll find out in post.
I suppose. So the Niagara River was used in the Industrial Revolution. I think they took chemicals. They had a chemical plant here. They had like mills. If you look over to the left over here, you'll see that an old factory.
Or is it a power plant?
I don't know what it is.
I don't know what it is either.
The Niagara River obviously is still today used to generate power for both the United States and Canada.
One of the largest hydroelectric power plants in the entire world is in Niagara Falls. What they do is they channel the water from upstream a little bit.
Put it closer here.
Put it closer. They channel the water through some caves they built upstream, downstream of us here, around the falls, run it through some generators, and spit it out after the falls. We actually have the 1950 treaty that delegates how much water can be taken so that there's always enough water for the tourists to see.
Right, and in the I think it was the 1970s. I know it was in the 1800s when they started coming here, but
Yeah.
in the early 1900s, they opened up the Great Lakes, a big entrance into the Great Lakes from the oceans, and when they did that, cargo ships started coming through into the Great Lakes, and they fill these tanks with water to kind of balance out the big cargo ships. And then when they would come here to pick things up, they'd have to release water when they were pulling their cargo. And when they did that, they would release all kinds of like foreign species into the fresh water. And so we have a lot of in this area mussels and things that are really originated in the Black Sea.
Yeah, the water quality on Lake Erie was awful in the 60s and 70s, considered one of the most polluted lakes in the country at one point, I believe. There's a famous incident on the Cuyahoga River in Ohio where the lake actually caught fire. In fact, I was just reading an article today, or a couple of days ago, saying how they're dredging the river right now, and their practice used to be to dump that soil and dirt back into the lake. They can't do that anymore because of all the toxic chemicals they have in there, PCBs and some other stuff that are horribly toxic, but the water quality is pretty good these days. I'd go swimming here if it was a little warmer.
Yeah, I've gone swimming here several times. You can actually see where we're at now. It's about 10 or 11 feet. You can actually see down to the bottom, which is unusual. When I was a kid, you definitely couldn't see that far into the water. So along with the Niagara River and the power plant and everything else, there's been a lot of daredevils in Niagara Falls. We had a guy that did a tightrope walk from the United States over to the Canada side of Niagara Falls. I can't remember his name. Was it Mendez or something like that?
But it was billed as the longest tightrope walk in history. Or supported one or something like that.
Yeah, so you can look that up. I remember he was really mad because he had to wear a safety harness.
And he had to carry a passport.
Yeah, which is hilarious.
Right.
And then of course our event for today, we're going to be discussing the ice bridge tragedy of 1912.
Yeah, I mean, it's a beautiful day out here. It's probably about 70, 75 degrees here. The water's probably about 50 or so, but come winter, this part is not that warm. And if you're by the falls, there's a lot of flowing water, a lot of cold air. And what happens? Ice. So you get these massive ice sheets over there, the ice bridge, and people want to be daredevils and walk across it.
Well, actually, before 1912, it was very common. People would, the ice bridge would form, and people would walk out onto this ice bridge. They'd set up little shacks and shops, and they'd sell tchotchkes and, I don't know, probably something warm to drink, who knows?
Alcohol.
Yeah, alcohol, like bootleg alcohol and things like that. And, so it was very common. People would look forward to it. People would come from all over to go out on the ice bridge between the United States and Canada. And, up until 1912.
And then something happened, which we'll talk about later. But what else is interesting to know is that there's a lot less ice now because, of course, it's managed better. There's more people in the air. There's houses all across the rivers. So you put out these ice booms so that the ice doesn't form and form blocks. Apparently, there's been times when this river has actually frozen over and you were able to walk from the U.S. to Canada across the river.
You definitely can. Yeah.
Once or twice it's happened in the last 200 years.
No, that's what the ice bridge was.
No, but I mean the river itself,
the
up
river
here,
itself, yeah.
where we are standing with you today.
Yeah.
And it's not very common anymore because there's some ice booms upstream that prevent the ice from coming here and forming blocks and dams. We got a little nice cigarette butt over there. The falls themselves aren't necessarily the falls. I mean, the falls are about 187 feet high. Yeah. Not even the tallest waterfall in New York State. I mean, obviously, by volume, it's the biggest waterfall easily in the U.S. and North America. I think not in the world. I think there's another one or two that are larger, but easily one of the largest, if not the largest in the world.
I think it's one of the eight wonders of the world.
It's considered something like that, which, I mean, we've been there. It's not that great, but it's impressive for a waterfall. But it's a waterfall. At the end of the day, it's not really that impressive. And what we do have here, we're well known for, are very strong rapids. And if you manage to survive the fall over the falls, you've got pretty much the strongest rapids in the world.
Well, you're definitely not going to survive a fall over the American Falls. There's tons of rocks at the bottom, and if you have video, you're going to see those rocks. The Horseshoe Falls on the Canadian side, however, does not have those rocks, but there's massive undertow that pull you down, and sometimes there's been people that have gone under, and they've never been found. They've never been found. They never came up. And if you do happen to come up and you pop out, you get pulled down the rapids, you get pulled down the water line, and then you end up in a whirlpool. And then the whirlpool goes in circles, and they have like a jet boat ride that you can take and go through that if you want to, but I've never done that.
Yes, we have Class 6 rapids here, which are, I believe, there's only 2 or 3 in the entire U.S., and the water travels over 20 miles an hour at peak speeds. So basically, this wonderful river that we have here, which is probably about half of the water volume going over Niagara Falls because it splits out over there, a different area, all this stuff gets channeled into an area that's about 20 or 30 feet wide. So that water is flowing, and you will not survive. Also, that water is cold, and that's a big risk of going over the falls is hypothermia, which I think we've covered in different episodes.
Sure have.
So you got the falls, as in falling, impact, from 187 feet, hitting a flowing water, whatever. That's probably about the same as falling about 100 stories from a building or so. And we got some more jet skis. So, shall we bring it on home here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, let's bring it on home. We'll head on over to the next location and we'll continue filming from there. Here we are, right at the Niagara River, near the Niagara Falls, about maybe 500 yards away or so, 600 yards. And as you can see behind us, if you're watching the video, there is pretty good rapids behind us. If you're not watching the video, then you can probably hear it because it's really loud.
Yes.
Here.
It's extremely loud. I can barely hear myself talk, which is probably a good thing. So these are probably some of the strongest rapids we'll see in this area, but then after you go over the falls, there's even stronger rapids. At least I think they're stronger. I don't think you'd be able to swim across here or walk across here.
Now let's move on to our story. Story found at NiagaraFallsInfo.com. February 4th, 1912. By noon, approximately 35 people were standing on the ice bridge, which formed each winter over the Niagara River below the falls. This ice bridge was wide and dense enough that it allowed people to cross the entire Niagara River from Canada to the United States on the surface of the ice, rather than using the international bridges located downstream. 2 such persons on this ice bridge were Eldridge Stanton, age 32, and his wife Clara Stanton, age 38, both natives of Toronto, Ontario. The Stantons had been married for 6 years and were regular visitors to Niagara Falls. They would come twice each year, once in summer and once in winter. They had arrived in Niagara Falls on Friday for a winter weekend visit. They strolled hand in hand as they crossed the ice field. Also on the ice bridge were Ignatius Roth and Burl Heacock, both age 17 and from Cleveland, Ohio, who were throwing snowballs and playing games. William Red Hill was opening the little refreshment stand he built every year as soon as the ice was thick enough. With him were Monroe Gilbert and William Labland. Hill suddenly felt a small tremor under his feet. At that same moment came a loud groaning sound from the base of the falls, which made roar of the distant falls faint. Immediately Hill recognized the danger and began running towards the Canadian shore as he shouted for the others to follow him. Labland, Gilbert, and the boys followed Hill. Mr. and Mrs. Stanton turned back towards the American shore. The ice bridge began heaving up and down and breaking apart as the grinding noises became louder. As the Stantons were inches from the shore, the ice separated and water appeared where the ice once was. As the gap began to widen, the Stantons were frozen from shock for a second before turning and racing for the Canadian shore. As they ran, Clara Stanton began to slow and stumbled to the ice from exhaustion within 50 feet of the Canadian shoreline. Eldridge Stanton tried unsuccessfully to lift his wife. The ice block on which they were standing began to move. In desperation, Stanton grabbed his wife and tried dragging her as he shouted for help from the men ahead. Labland was in waist-deep icy water, and with the assistance of Hill, they pulled Roth to shore and shouted for Heacock to jump to safety. Heacock heard the cries for help from Stanton and turned around. Heacock rushed toward the Stantons in a desperate attempt to save them. Heacock reached the Stantons and helped Eldridge lift his wife to her feet. Together they tried to get Clara to shore, but the gap between the ice and shore was quickly widening. The 3 were now stranded as the ice bridge flowed ever quickly downstream. The ice sheet was swinging wildly. On this ice sheet, the Stantons and Heacock paced back and forth. Heacock and Eldridge were seen talking while Clara stood holding her husband's hand. As they passed beneath the first of 3 bridges spanning the Niagara Gorge, the ice sheet seemed to edge towards the American shore. Directly downstream, a hydroelectric station was discharging water into the river. The pressure from this discharge crumbled the nearest edge of the ice, forcing the 3 to the opposite side. The giant ice sheet broke into 2 pieces. One half drifted towards the American shore, while the other half, on which Heacock and the Stantons stood, remained in midstream. The first half grounded out against the American shoreline. On each of the 2 lower bridges, located 300 yards apart, firemen, policemen, and railway workers had stationed themselves in order to lower ropes to those stranded as the passed underneath. Stanton was seen placing his arm around the waist of his wife. About a quarter mile before the rapids, the ice sheet broke in half again, this time separating the Stantons from Heacock. Heacock waved and shouted something, and Stanton returned the salute. Clara crouched down beside her husband. The river current was becoming faster as it neared the rapids. Heacock's ice sheet remained in midstream. Heacock took off his coat in preparation of attempting to grab one of the dangling ropes. As he passed beneath the bridge, Heacock grabbed one of the ropes and swung free of the ice floe he was riding on. Heacock was plunged waist-deep into the water as his rescuers attempted to lift him. As he was hoisted 60 feet above the water, Heacock lost his grip of the rope and fell into the raging river below. After entering the rapids, Heacock was never seen again. The Stantons had watched Heacock's valiant attempts. As the ice block swirled them under the cantilever bridge, Stanton quickly grabbed the nearest rope and looped it around his wife's waist. As the ice block continued downstream, the rope became weak and broke. Stanton grabbed another rope as they passed underneath the lower bridge. Once more he quickly tied the rope around his wife's waist. Knowing the attempt would be futile, he immediately changed his mind and untied the rope. Stanton took his wife in his arms, kissed her, and let her down.
They both knelt together with his arms around her. The remaining piece of the ice bridge remained intact until it reached a giant wave in the rapids. It spilled over, throwing both of them into the raging water to their deaths.
Here are some tips you can follow. Heed warnings. William Red Hill, a regular at the ice bridge, sensed the danger from the tremors under his feet. This indicates that experience and knowledge can play a vital role in foreseeing potential danger. Following the advice and caution from local experts, especially those familiar with the area's specific conditions, can save lives. Avoid crossing frozen water bodies. Crossing bodies of frozen water, especially large ones like the Niagara River, is inherently risky due to the unpredictable nature of ice conditions. It is better to use established, safer methods of travel. React swiftly and appropriately in emergencies. In situations of high stress and danger, every second count. Mr. and Mrs. Stanton were paralyzed by the shock of the incident for a vital few moments, which unfortunately resulted in them being stranded. Being prepared for emergencies and understanding how to respond can make a significant difference. In conclusion, remember that nature is powerful and unpredictable. It is our responsibility to respect it and take all necessary precautions when engaging with it to ensure our safety and the safety of others. Thank you for watching. We hope to see you next week for our next episode. Please remember to like and subscribe, and as always, stay safe out there.